How do you know what is the right thing to do? I tend to ask myself this question every time I read the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And then again when someone on the street asks me for money. It happened last Tuesday on 4th Avenue North in Birmingham, where I was waiting for Phyllis. We were going to our weekly Rotary Club meeting, and I parked on one end of the block, and she parked on the other end of the block. And if you're familiar with Rotary, the motto of our club is service above self. When a man passed me by on the sidewalk as I was waiting for Phyllis, and he said, "You look very dapper this morning," went right to my ego. And as I was standing there, being quite pleased with myself for my wardrobe selection that day, he asked me for money. Now, immediately, all my defenses went up. But I looked at him, and he didn't look like what I expected. He didn't smell. He wasn't dirty. He actually looked quite nice. And he smiled as he told me that he just moved to Birmingham and that he was trying to find work but hadn't been successful, and he was out looking for something for his wife and daughter to eat for breakfast. And he didn't have enough money. Well, I have a daughter. I have a granddaughter. And there were no grocery stores of any kind anywhere near 4th Avenue in Birmingham. It was 6:45 in the morning, so restaurants were closed. I looked into his eyes. I wanted to know if he was on drugs. He wasn't. I had money and credit cards in my wallet, so I gave him $20. Was it the right thing to do? There have been any number of times over the years when I've given money to someone, and I think it was probably used for something other than what I was told. There was a time in Georgetown, Kentucky, when I was in seminary and serving that summer at Trinity Episcopal Church. And during the Sunday Eucharist, halfway through the sermon, the back door opened up and a young man came in. He had long hair and a beard and was wearing sandals. He looked like Jesus in Levi's and a t-shirt. He wanted me to stop preaching and talk to him. I motioned for him to sit and wait. At the piece, he told me he needed money to buy medicine for his mother because she had just gotten out of the hospital. The thing was, he didn't have a prescription. He couldn't tell me what hospital she'd been in. He didn't know what pharmacy he was going to. And his pupils were about the size of quarters. He started to get impatient, and I had a church service going on, and so I gave him $20 so he would leave. Was it the right thing to do? Jesus tells the parable of the rich man and Lazarus to the people that day, and it'd be easy to say that the moral of this story tells us that, yes, we should always feed the hungry and the poor. In seminary, ethics and moral theology were probably my favorite classes. I love those questions. Do the means justify the end or the other way around? Do you just feed everyone so that you make sure you actually help the ones who really do need it? Clearly, this is a moral tale that Jesus is telling this day, and we can go back and forth about what is our responsibility, but is that all there is to it? I don't think so. You see, this is a parable, and parables talk about the kingdom of heaven, which is what Jesus was trying to describe to the people that day. Notice that nowhere in this story does Jesus say that the rich man lived a bad life on earth and that Lazarus was a good man. All we're told is that Lazarus goes to heaven and the rich man to Hades. And we have to assume that economics has nothing to do with it. For if that was the case, then that would mean that salvation is dependent on little more than money. But then I read our passage from 1 Timothy. I don't know that I've ever paid that much attention to it before. And it all kind of came together when I got to the last verse. It says, whether we are rich or poor, young or old, whoever we are to do good, to be rich in good works, generous and ready to share, thus storing up the treasure of a good foundation for the future. And this is the best part of it. It says, so that we may take hold of the life that really is life. Jesus is telling the people that day that life in the kingdom of heaven begins with the love of God. And we're called to share that love with everyone. We're called to share what we have in love. Love one another as Christ loves us, and feed those who are hungry in body and soul. Every box of food that we share at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter feeds souls and stomachs and spirits of people who are hungry for more than just food. Every bag of beans and rice spreads God's love far wider than just the 250 families. The rich man went to Hades because he did not believe in God, and so he did not know how or what to share with anyone, including Lazarus. Lazarus went to heaven because he knew the love of God, and he shared it with everyone, even though he had no money. I believe that Lazarus, in his own way, shared the love of God with that rich man who never even knew it because he did not know what that kind of love is all about. Loving God and loving our neighbor is always the right thing to do. On Tuesday on 4th Avenue North in Birmingham, the man I met asked me what business I was in. I told him I was an Episcopal minister. He asked me if that was the same thing as being a Christian. I assured him it was. He asked me to pray with him, and I asked him to pray for me. And so we did right there on the street corner. He went his way, and I went to meet Phyllis. I've thought about him all week. It was the right thing to do. Amen.